What if everything you've been told about success is backwards? What if the hustle, the grind, the constant motion that everyone glorifies is actually the thing slowly destroying you? What if the answer to your burnout, your anxiety, your feeling of being completely lost isn't doing more, it's stopping completely? Right now, in this very second, you're moving at a pace your soul was never designed to sustain. Your body is screaming for rest, but you've been taught that rest is weakness, that pausing is failure, that stillness is the enemy of achievement. You're about to discover why the most powerful thing you can do for your life isn't adding more, it's subtracting everything until you remember who you actually are beneath all the noise. This isn't about meditation apps or weekend retreats. This is about the pause that saves your life. Let's begin. Imagine you're driving down a highway at 100 miles per hour. You've been driving at this speed for so long that it feels normal. Your hands are gripping the wheel. Your eyes are locked on the road ahead. Your foot is pressing the accelerator. You're exhausted, but you can't slow down because everyone around you is also driving 100 miles per hour. And if you slow down, you'll get left behind. You'll be seen as lazy. You'll fall behind in the race. But here's what you don't realize. You forgot where you were going. You've been driving so fast for so long that you completely lost track of your actual destination. You're just driving because everyone else is driving. You're going fast because going fast feels important. But you have no idea if you're even heading in the right direction anymore. This is the reality for millions of people right now. They're moving at unsustainable speeds through life, working relentlessly, checking boxes, chasing goals, staying busy, keeping up appearances, scrolling endlessly, consuming constantly, producing continuously, and somewhere in all that motion, they lost themselves. They lost their purpose. They lost their peace. They lost any sense of who they actually are beneath all the doing. And then something happens. Maybe it's a health crisis. Maybe it's a breakdown. Maybe it's a moment of clarity where they realize they're completely empty despite appearing successful. Maybe it's hitting rock bottom. Whatever it is, it forces them to stop. And in that pause, that unwanted, uncomfortable, terrifying pause, they discover something profound. The pause is where healing lives. The pause is where clarity emerges. The pause is where you remember who you are. This is what Deep Verma discovered and shares in The Pause That Saved Me, embracing stillness to reclaim yourself. This isn't a book about productivity hacks or life optimization. This is a book about stopping, completely stopping. Not to rest before you start running again, but to question whether you should be running at all. Verma's premise is radical in a culture that glorifies busyness. You are not your achievements. You are not your productivity. You are not your output. You are not the sum of your accomplishments, or your Instagram highlights, or your resume. Beneath all the doing, beneath all the performing, beneath all the striving, there is a you, a real, authentic, valuable you that has been buried under years of conditioning, expectations, and constant motion. And the only way to find that person again is to pause. Not a brief pause, not a strategic pause that's really just a pit stop before you accelerate again. A real pause. A pause that feels uncomfortable and unproductive. A pause where you sit with yourself without distraction, without entertainment, without numbing, without filling the space. a pause where you let everything you've been running from finally catch up to you. This terrifies most people. We've been taught that stillness is dangerous, that if we stop moving, we'll lose momentum, that if we're not constantly producing, we have no value, that if we pause to reflect, we might discover uncomfortable truths about our lives. So we stay in motion, we stay busy, we stay distracted. We call it ambition when it's actually avoidance. Verma argues that this constant motion isn't moving you forward, it's preventing you from discovering where you actually need to go. You're so busy climbing the ladder that you never stop to ask if it's leaning against the right wall. You're so busy running the race that you never questioned whether it's a race you even want to win. The pause that saves you isn't about taking a vacation or scheduling a spa day. It's about fundamentally disrupting the pattern of constant motion and creating space for something most people have completely lost. Self-awareness. It's about asking questions you've been too busy to ask. Who am I beneath all the roles I play? What do I actually want? Not what I think I should want. What matters to me? Not what I've been told should matter. What am I running toward, and what am I running from? These questions are terrifying because answering them honestly might mean your whole life needs to change. It might mean the career you've built isn't actually aligned with who you are. It might mean the relationship you're in isn't serving your growth. It might mean the person you've been pretending to be on social media has nothing to do with who you actually are. It might mean you need to disappoint people, set boundaries, and choose yourself in ways you never have before. This is why most people never pause. The pause reveals the truth, and the truth requires change. And change feels like death to the ego that's been performing and achieving and seeking approval for years. But here's what Verma discovered, and what thousands of people who've experienced this pause have discovered. On the other side of that, death is rebirth. On the other side of releasing who you thought you had to be is discovering who you actually are. On the other side of the pause is a life that's no longer about proving your worth, but about expressing your authentic self. The subtitle captures the journey: Embracing Stillness to Reclaim Yourself. You're not creating a new you. You're reclaiming the you that was always there, but got buried under expectations, trauma, conditioning, and the relentless pressure to be productive. The pause is how you excavate your true self from beneath all the rubble. What you're about to discover in this video isn't comfortable. It's not a quick fix. It's not a productivity hack that helps you achieve more. It's the opposite. It's about achieving less and being more. It's about stopping the insane pace you've been moving at and asking if that pace is actually taking you anywhere worth going. It's about embracing stillness in a world that profits from your constant motion. This might be the most important message you hear all year, not because it's complex, but because it's so simple that you've been overlooking it while searching for more complicated solutions. The answer to your overwhelm isn't better time management. The answer to your anxiety isn't another achievement. The answer to your emptiness isn't more consumption. The answer is the pause. Let's explore it. Chapter 1. The breaking point. Most people don't choose the pause. The pause chooses them. Verma opens with a universal truth. You rarely stop by choice. You stop because life forces you to stop. Your body breaks down. Your mind breaks down. A crisis hits. A loss devastates you. Something happens that makes continuing at your current pace literally impossible. This is the breaking point, and it's one of the most important moments in a person's life, though it doesn't feel that way when you're in it. When you're at your breaking point, it feels like failure. It feels like everything is falling apart. It feels like you're weak, like you couldn't handle what everyone else seems to handle just fine. You feel ashamed that you hit a wall while others are still running. But Verma reframes the breaking point entirely. The breaking point isn't failure, it's feedback. It's your system saying, this is not sustainable. It's your body saying, I can't continue like this. It's your soul saying, this life you're living is not aligned with who you are. The breaking point is actually a breaking through, a forced disruption of patterns that were slowly destroying you. Think about it. If you never hit the wall, you would have kept running in the wrong direction indefinitely. You would have spent your entire life living someone else's definition of success. You would have sacrificed your health, relationships, and authentic self on the altar of productivity and achievement. The breaking point, as painful as it is, might be the thing that saves your life. The chapter explores the most common breaking points. For some, it's health, burnout, chronic stress, anxiety, depression, physical illness. Your body literally shuts down because it can't sustain the pace anymore. For others, it's a major life event, a death, a divorce, a job loss, a trauma. Something so significant happens that your normal coping mechanisms don't work. For others still, it's existential. You wake up one day with everything you thought you wanted and feel completely empty. You achieved the goals, climbed the ladder, checked all the boxes, and discovered that none of it brought the fulfillment you were promised. The existential breaking point might be the most painful because there's no external crisis to point to. You just feel hollow despite looking successful. Verma emphasizes that resisting the breaking point makes everything worse. When you hit the wall and immediately try to push through it, to power through the exhaustion, to medicate the anxiety, to distract from the emptiness, you're just delaying the inevitable. The breaking point will keep returning, usually louder and more forcefully, until you finally stop and listen. The chapter ends with this. The breaking point is an invitation. It's an invitation to examine your life honestly, to question the pace you've been moving at, to evaluate whether the life you're living is the life you actually want, to consider that maybe you're not broken, maybe the system you're operating in is broken, and your breakdown is actually sanity trying to break through. Chapter 2, The Culture of Constant Motion. Before we can understand why the pause is so powerful, we need to understand what we're pausing from. This chapter exposes the culture that made the pause necessary in the first place. The culture of constant motion, relentless productivity, and performance-based worth. Verma argues that modern culture has created a machine that feeds on your constant activity. Social media rewards posting and engaging constantly. Capitalism rewards productivity and output above all else. Success culture glorifies the hustle, the grind, the sacrifice of everything for achievement. Rest is seen as laziness. Stillness is seen as stagnation. Doing nothing is seen as wasting time. This creates a psychological trap. Your worth becomes tied to your productivity. If you're not producing, achieving, improving, or progressing, you feel worthless. You internalize the message that your value as a human being is determined by what you do, not who you are. This is devastating because it means you can never actually rest. Rest becomes yet another thing you have to optimize. Power naps for better performance. Meditation for stress management, so you can work more. Vacations so you can return recharged to work harder. Even rest gets commodified and turned into productivity. You're not resting for the sake of rest. You're resting to perform better. You're a machine that needs maintenance so it can keep running efficiently. You've completely lost the concept of rest as valuable in itself, of being as worthwhile separate from doing. The chapter explores how this shows up everywhere. You can't sit through a meal without checking your phone. You can't be in a quiet moment without immediately filling it with a podcast or music. You can't have a free weekend without filling it with plans. You feel guilty when you're doing nothing. You apologize for not being busy enough. You compete with others about who's more overwhelmed, as if exhaustion is a badge of honor. But here's what Verma reveals. This constant motion isn't moving you forward. It's keeping you distracted from the fact that you're moving in the wrong direction. As long as you're busy, you don't have to face the uncomfortable questions. As long as you're achieving, you don't have to examine whether the achievements matter. As long as you're in motion, you don't have to sit with the emptiness that might be waiting in the stillness. Motion becomes a drug. It numbs you. It gives you the illusion of progress. It provides temporary hits of dopamine and validation. But it never actually fills you because you're running on a hedonic treadmill. The more you do, the more you need to do to feel the same level of accomplishment. The culture of constant motion also prevents genuine connection with yourself and with others. You're so busy performing your life for an audience that you never actually live your life. You're so focused on the external metrics of success that you never develop internal awareness. You know what your Instagram followers think about you, but you have no idea who you actually are when no one's watching. Verma emphasizes that this culture isn't natural. Humans weren't designed for constant productivity. We evolved with natural rhythms, activity and rest, exertion and recovery, doing and being. But modern culture has declared war on rest and being. It demands constant doing, and we're paying the price with epidemic levels of anxiety, depression, burnout, and existential emptiness. The chapter ends with this question: what would happen if you stopped participating in this culture? What if you stopped treating your worth as something to be earned through constant achievement? What if you gave yourself permission to be still, to be unproductive, to simply exist without justification? That's what the next chapter explores. Chapter 3, Embracing Stillness. Now we arrive at the practice that terrifies most people. Stillness. Not the Instagram aesthetic version of stillness where you're photogenically meditating in perfect lighting. Real stillness. Uncomfortable stillness. Stillness where you sit with yourself and all the feelings you've been running from finally catch up. Verma describes stillness as the practice of non-doing. It's not about clearing your mind or achieving some Zen state. It's about stopping the constant motion and allowing yourself to simply be present with whatever arises. No goals, no optimization, no purpose other than being present with yourself. This sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because when you stop moving, when you stop distracting, when you stop numbing everything you've been avoiding surfaces, the anxiety you've been medicating with busyness, the grief you've been outrunning with achievement, the anger you've been suppressing with people-pleasing, the fear that if you're not constantly proving your worth, you have no worth. Stillness brings you face to face with your shadow, all the parts of yourself you've rejected, hidden, or tried to transcend through constant self-improvement. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It's the opposite of the spiritual bypassing that's popular in wellness culture, where you just think positive thoughts and visualize your best life. But here's what Verma discovered. You can't heal what you won't feel. All those emotions you've been avoiding don't disappear because you're too busy to feel them. They just get stored in your body, in your nervous system, creating chronic tension, anxiety, and disconnection. Stillness creates the space for those emotions to finally be felt, processed, and released. The chapter provides practical guidance for embracing stillness. Start small. Even 5 minutes of sitting without distraction is profound. When you're used to constant motion, don't expect it to feel good. Let go of trying to do it right. This isn't another achievement to optimize. It's permission to just be. Verma emphasizes that stillness isn't about forcing yourself into a meditative state. It's about creating space and seeing what naturally arises. Maybe it's emotion, maybe it's insight, maybe it's just awareness of how exhausted you actually are. Whatever arises, you don't try to fix it or change it. You just allow it to be. This is radically different from how most people approach personal growth, which is fundamentally about doing more. More affirmations, more journaling, more reading, more courses, more techniques. Stillness is about doing less, about subtracting all the techniques and just meeting yourself as you are right now. The chapter addresses common resistances. I don't have time for stillness. You have time for social media. You have time for Netflix. You have time for what you prioritize. The real resistance is fear of what you might discover in the stillness. Stillness makes me anxious. Yes, because you're finally feeling the anxiety that's been there all along. The stillness isn't creating it, it's revealing it. And revealing it is the first step toward healing it. I need to be productive. This is the deepest conditioning to break, the belief that your value comes from your productivity. Stillness is the practice of reclaiming your inherent worth as a human being, separate from what you produce. You are valuable simply because you exist, period. Stillness teaches you to embody this truth instead of just intellectually understanding it. The chapter ends with this. Stillness is not the absence of activity. It's the presence of awareness. You can wash dishes in stillness. You can walk in stillness. You can be with another person in stillness. It's not about what you're doing. It's about the quality of presence you bring to whatever you're doing. And learning to access that presence requires practice in literal stillness first. Chapter 4. Reclaiming your authentic self. The stillness reveals something profound. You've been living as a constructed self, a version of you designed to meet expectations, gain approval, avoid rejection, and succeed according to external metrics. And beneath that constructed self is your authentic self, the you that exists before conditioning, before trauma, before you learn to perform for survival. Verma explores how we lose our authentic selves. As children, we're naturally authentic. We express what we feel. We do what brings us joy. We're unapologetically ourselves, but then we start receiving messages. Don't cry. Be polite. Stop being so loud. You need to be more responsible. That's not realistic. People will judge you. Slowly, you learn to suppress parts of yourself that aren't acceptable. You learn to perform in ways that gain approval. You develop a persona, a socially acceptable version of yourself that's safe, that fits in, that achieves. And you forget that this persona is not who you actually are. You start identifying with it. The mask becomes your face. The tragedy is that you achieve success as this constructed self, which means the success never actually fulfills you. You got the job, the relationship, the lifestyle you wanted, but you got it as the persona, not as your authentic self. So even when you have everything you thought you wanted, you feel empty because you're not actually there. The constructed self is living your life, while your authentic self is screaming from somewhere buried deep inside. Reclaiming your authentic self requires two things: awareness and courage. Awareness to recognize when you're operating from the constructed self versus the authentic self. Courage to start expressing your authentic self even when it risks disapproval, judgment, or rejection. Verma provides powerful questions for excavating your authentic self. When was the last time you did something purely because it brought you joy, not because it was productive or impressive? What would you do if no one was watching or judging? What parts of yourself have you hidden because they're not acceptable? What do you actually want, not what you think you should want? These questions are confronting because answering them honestly might reveal massive misalignment between the life you're living and the life your authentic self actually wants. Maybe you're in a career that impresses others but drains your soul. Maybe you're in a relationship where you have to suppress your authentic self to keep the peace. Maybe you've built an entire identity around being a certain way, and your authentic self is nothing like that. The chapter explores the fear of authenticity. What if people don't like the real you? What if you lose relationships by setting boundaries and speaking your truth? What if you fail when you stop performing and start being authentic? These are real risks. Authenticity is not safe. It's not always rewarded. Some people will reject the authentic you because they preferred the constructed version that met their needs. But here's what Verma learned. Living as your authentic self, even if it's harder in some ways, is the only path to genuine fulfillment. Because even if you have the whole world's approval, if you don't have your own, you'll never feel at peace. Even if you achieve everything society deems successful, if it's not aligned with your authentic values, you'll feel empty. Reclaiming your authentic self is not a destination. It's an ongoing practice. Every day you have moments where you can choose to perform or choose to be authentic. Every interaction is a choice between pleasing others or honoring yourself. Every decision is a choice between external approval or internal alignment. The chapter ends with this: your authentic self is not something you need to create or achieve. It's something you need to uncover and allow. All the work is removing what's covering it: the conditioning, the people-pleasing, the fear-based decisions, the performance. Beneath all of that, you're already whole. You already have everything you need. You just forgot. Chapter 5, The Power of Letting Go. Once you've paused and started reconnecting with your authentic self, you realize how much you've been carrying that was never yours to carry. This chapter is about the liberation that comes from letting go of expectations, of identities, of relationships, of goals that aren't actually yours. Verma describes the phenomenon of carrying inherited burdens. You're carrying your parents' unfulfilled dreams. You're carrying society's definition of success. You're carrying expectations from people who don't even know you. You're carrying trauma you didn't cause. You're carrying responsibilities that aren't actually yours. And you're exhausted because you're trying to live your life while carrying all of this weight that was never meant to be yours. Letting go begins with identifying what's actually yours versus what you've taken on from others. The career path you're on, is that what you want? Or what your parents wanted for you? The lifestyle you're striving for, is that your authentic desire or a response to societal pressure? The relationship you're in, are you staying because you genuinely want to? Or because you're afraid of disappointing someone or being alone? These questions are terrifying because answering them honestly might mean releasing things you've invested years into. It might mean disappointing people you love. It might mean admitting that the life you've built isn't actually the life you want. But Verma argues that continuing to carry what's not yours is far more costly than the discomfort of letting go. The chapter explores different types of letting go. Letting go of relationships that require you to be small, that drain your energy, or that are based on who you used to be rather than who you are now. This doesn't always mean cutting people off. Sometimes it means changing the terms of the relationship, setting boundaries, or allowing relationships to naturally evolve or end, letting go of identities you've outgrown. Maybe you've been the responsible one, the successful one, the strong one, the caretaker. These identities served you at some point, but they might be limiting you now. Who would you be if you weren't constantly playing that role? What parts of yourself have been suppressed to maintain that identity? Letting go of goals that aren't aligned with your authentic self. This is particularly painful for high achievers who've spent years working toward goals that suddenly don't matter anymore. The pause reveals that what you thought you wanted was actually what you were told to want. Letting go of those goals feels like failure, but it's actually course correction. Letting go of control. This might be the hardest one. Verma argues that much of our stress comes from trying to control things we can't control, other people's opinions, outcomes, circumstances, the future. We grip tightly to create an illusion of safety, but that grip just creates tension. Letting go of control doesn't mean becoming passive. It means focusing your energy on what you can actually control, your responses, your choices, your actions, and releasing the rest. The chapter provides practices for letting go, physically releasing through movement, breath, and sound, allowing your body to literally release the tension you've been holding, emotionally processing through feeling instead of suppressing. You can't let go of what you haven't fully felt. Mentally releasing through questioning the stories you tell yourself about what you should be doing or who you should be. Verma emphasizes that letting go creates space. Space for new possibilities. Space for your authentic self. Space for relationships that actually nourish you. Space for pursuits that genuinely matter to you. But you can't fill your cup with fresh water while you're clutching the old stagnant water. You have to pour it out first. The chapter ends with this insight. Letting go is not loss. What's actually yours can never be lost. What leaves was never meant to stay, and what remains after you've let go of everything that's not essential. That's your real life. That's what actually matters. Everything else was just weight. Chapter 6. Reconnecting with your body. One of the casualties of constant motion and living in your head is disconnection from your body. This chapter explores how to return to your body and why that's essential for reclaiming yourself. Verma points out that most people live almost entirely in their heads, thinking, planning, analyzing, worrying. The body is just the thing that carries your head around. You're so disconnected from your body that you only notice it when something goes wrong, when you're in pain, sick, or completely exhausted. But your body holds wisdom that your mind can't access. Your body knows when something is wrong before your mind admits it. Your body knows what you need before your mind rationalizes it away. Your body speaks in sensations, intuitions, and felt senses that modern culture has taught you to ignore in favor of logical thinking. Think about how disconnected we are. You ignore hunger signals and eat on a schedule. You override exhaustion signals and push through tiredness. You suppress emotional signals and call it professionalism. You ignore your body's communication until it has to scream through chronic pain, illness, or breakdown. By then, it's been whispering for years. Reconnecting with your body begins with awareness, simply noticing what your body feels like right now. Where is there tension? Where is there ease? What's your breath doing? What emotions are present as physical sensations? Most people can't answer these questions because they're so disconnected from their physical experience. The chapter provides practices for reconnecting, body scanning, slowly moving attention through your body and noticing sensations without trying to change them. Movement practices that aren't about fitness or achievement, but about feeling and expressing. Dance, yoga, walking in nature, anything where the goal is presence rather than outcome. Breath work. Your breath is the bridge between your conscious and unconscious, your mind and body. Most people breathe shallowly, which keeps their nervous system in a state of low-grade stress. Learning to breathe fully and consciously is one of the fastest ways to regulate your nervous system and return to your body. Verma emphasizes that emotions live in your body, not your head. When you try to process emotions mentally, analyzing them, understanding them, thinking about them, you're not actually processing them. You're just thinking about them. Real emotional processing happens through feeling them in your body and allowing them to move through you. This is why stillness practices are so powerful. They bring you back to your body, where the actual processing can happen. And this is why people avoid stillness. They don't want to feel what's stored in their body, but avoiding it doesn't make it go away. It just keeps you disconnected and creates chronic tension. The chapter addresses how trauma creates body disconnection. When something overwhelming happens, disconnecting from your body is a survival mechanism. You dissociate to escape unbearable sensations. But what works in crisis becomes problematic when it's your default mode. You can't heal trauma while disconnected from your body because the trauma is stored in your body. Reconnecting with your body after trauma requires gentleness and safety. You don't force it. You gradually learn to tolerate being in your body, to befriend sensations instead of escaping them, to trust your body again after it's been a place of pain or overwhelm. The chapter ends with this: your body is not separate from you. It's not a vehicle your mind is driving. You are a body. Your consciousness is embodied. And many of the answers you're seeking intellectually are already available to you somatically, through your body's wisdom. But you have to be present in your body to access that wisdom. Chapter 7. Creating a New Relationship with Time. The pause fundamentally changes your relationship with time. This chapter explores how to stop living in a state of constant rush and create a relationship with time that supports presence rather than anxiety. Verma argues that most people experience time as their enemy. There's never enough time. Time is running out. You're racing against time. You measure your worth by how much you accomplish in time. This creates chronic stress and a feeling of always being behind, never enough, constantly chasing. But time itself is neutral. Your experience of time is determined by your relationship with it. When you're present, time expands. Minutes feel spacious. When you're anxious and future-focused, time collapses. Hours disappear, and you can't remember where they went. The pause teaches you a different relationship with time. When you stop racing, when you practice stillness, when you bring full presence to whatever you're doing, you discover that you actually have enough time for what matters. The problem was never lack of time. It was lack of presence and misalignment of priorities. The chapter explores practical shifts. Single tasking instead of multitasking. When you give full attention to one thing, you do it better and faster than when you're splitting attention across multiple things. Plus, you're actually present for your life instead of just skimming across the surface of everything. Creating margins in your schedule. Modern culture teaches you to pack every moment, to optimize every gap, to be efficient with every minute. But margins, space between activities, are essential for presence. They're the breath between notes that makes music beautiful rather than just noise. Verma introduces the concept of sacred time, time that's protected from productivity, achievement, or optimization, time where your only job is to be present. This might be morning stillness before you start your day. It might be a weekly nature walk. It might be evening time with no screens. Whatever it is, it's time where you're not producing anything. You're just being. The chapter addresses the guilt that comes up around wasting time. You've been so conditioned to be productive that doing nothing feels wrong. But Verma reframes. Time spent being present, reconnecting with yourself, and replenishing your energy is not wasted. It's essential. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. The chapter also explores how the pause shifts your future orientation. Most people spend their present moment either dwelling on the past or anxious about the future. They're never actually here. The pause trains you to be present, which doesn't mean you don't plan or have goals. It means you're not sacrificing your entire present moment for some future moment that may never feel satisfying when you get there. Verma shares the insight that life isn't happening later when you achieve something or when circumstances change. Life is happening right now, and if you're not present for this moment because you're focused on the next moment, you're missing your actual life. Most people realize this too late, when they're looking back with regret at all the moments they were too busy or distracted to actually experience. The chapter ends with this: creating a new relationship with time isn't about managing time better. It's about being present for time. It's about recognizing that you don't have to earn the right to be present through productivity. You can just be here, now, with what is, without needing it to be different or better or more. And, paradoxically, when you stop racing through time and start being present in time, you accomplish what actually matters with far less stress. Chapter 8. Living from the Pause. The final chapter addresses sustainability. How do you maintain the transformation that comes from the pause? How do you live from this new awareness without gradually sliding back into old patterns of constant motion and disconnection? Verma acknowledges that this is the hardest part. The pause itself, the forced stopping, the stillness, the reconnection, is challenging but relatively straightforward. The real challenge is integrating what you learned in the pause into your ongoing life. Because life doesn't pause forever, demands return, responsibilities accumulate, and the culture that contributed to your burnout is still there, still pulling you toward constant motion. Living from the pause means fundamentally restructuring your life around your authentic values rather than external expectations. This requires ongoing choices, boundaries, and willingness to disappoint people who were invested in your old way of being. The chapter explores practical integration, daily practices that keep you connected to stillness even when life gets busy. This might be 5 minutes of morning stillness, regular check-ins with your body throughout the day, or evening reflection. These practices aren't about achieving anything. They're about maintaining connection with yourself amidst the motion of life. Regular pause points. Even after the major pause, you need smaller pauses. Maybe it's a weekly day of rest. Maybe it's monthly solitude. Maybe it's quarterly retreats. These are built into your life as non-negotiable times to stop, reconnect, and evaluate whether your life is still aligned with your authentic self. Verma emphasizes the importance of boundaries. Living from the pause requires saying no to things that pull you out of alignment, no to opportunities that don't serve your authentic path, no to relationships that require you to be small, no to commitments that overextend you. Every yes to something is a no to something else. Living from the pause means consciously choosing your yeses based on your values rather than obligation, guilt, or fear. The chapter addresses the challenge of staying authentic in relationships and work environments that expect your old persona. Some people will be confused or even resistant to your transformation. They liked you better when you were over-functioning, people-pleasing, or constantly achieving. Standing firm in your authentic self when others pressure you to return to old patterns requires courage and self-trust. Verma also discusses the practice of ongoing awareness. The old patterns will try to reassert themselves. The urge to fill every moment, the impulse to prove your worth through productivity, the temptation to disconnect from uncomfortable feelings. Living from the pause means catching these patterns early and making different choices before you're back in full burnout mode. The chapter acknowledges that you might need to pause again. Life will present new challenges, transitions, and growth edges. The pause isn't a one-time event that fixes everything forever. It's a practice you return to whenever you notice you've lost yourself in motion again. But each time you pause, you'll catch yourself faster and reconnect more quickly. Verma ends with a powerful vision. Imagine living a life where you're connected to yourself, where your actions align with your authentic values, where you're present for your actual life rather than constantly focused on the next achievement. This isn't about having no goals or ambitions. It's about pursuing them from a place of wholeness rather than lack, from presence rather than anxiety, from authentic desire rather than should living from the pause means your worth is no longer tied to what you produce. It means you can rest without guilt. It means you can be still without feeling like you're wasting time. It means you trust yourself to know what you need and honor that even when it disappoints others. It means you're finally living your life instead of performing someone else's version of what your life should be. The chapter ends with this: the pause saved you not by taking you somewhere new, but by bringing you home to yourself. Everything you've been searching for, the peace, the fulfillment, the sense of being enough, was never in the next achievement or the future moment when everything would finally be perfect.